The paper shouldn't have survived the fire. Ayana knelt in what remained of the trading post, her fingers brushing against charred timber and melted glass. 3 days had passed since the flames died. 3 days since she'd watched her only sanctuary in the white man's world turn to smoke and ash. The other Comanche had warned her about living between two peoples belonging fully to neither, trusted by none. But there it was, a single sheet of parchment, yellowed and singed at the edges, tucked beneath a collapsed beam like it had been waiting for her to find it. She lifted it carefully, her weathered hands trembling as familiar handwriting emerged from the soot. The script was precise, deliberate, the kind that belonged to educated men who signed death warrants and land deeds with equal indifference. To whoever finds this, my name is Colonel James Morrison. If you are reading this, then the fire has done what my conscience could not. I am dying, and there are debts that cannot follow me to whatever judgment awaits. Ayana's breath caught. Morrison, the name that had haunted her dreams for 12 winters, the name she'd carved into her heart alongside the memory of her father's blood seeping into desert sand. I killed Chief Running Bear of the Comanche on September 15, 1871, not in battle, as the reports claimed, in cold blood, while he sat unarmed in my tent under a flag of truce. The letter trembled in her grip. Around her the ruins of the trading post seemed to press closer, as if the very walls were listening. Her father had ridden to that meeting believing in peace, trusting in the white man's word. She had been 17 then, already caught between worlds, speaking English as fluently as Comanche, trading goods between her people and the settlements. His daughter was there that day. I remember her eyes, how they changed when she saw what I had done. I have seen those same eyes in my nightmares for over a decade. Ayana forced herself to keep reading, though each word felt like swallowing glass. The wind picked up, scattering ash around her like grey snow. The girl disappeared after the massacre. Some say she died, some say she went back to her people. I pray she found peace, because I never did. If she lives, she deserves to know the truth. About that day, about what her father said before he died, and about what he made me promise. The letter continued, but the words blurred as tears she'd refused to shed for 12 years finally came. Colonel Morrison, the monster who'd stolen her father, her innocence, her place in either world, had left her a confession, but confessions, she knew, were just the beginning of much deeper truths. Ayana read the letter 3 more times before the words truly settled. Each reading revealed new layers of Morrison's guilt, but it was the final paragraph that made her hands shake. Chief Running Bear's last words were not a curse, as I told my superiors. He asked me to protect his daughter if she ever needed sanctuary. She will walk between 2 worlds, he said, and both will try to destroy her for it. I gave him my word, then put a bullet in his chest. The trading post was my attempt to honor that promise. Every transaction, every kindness shown to the woman who calls herself Anna Thompson, I knew it was his daughter. I recognized those eyes the moment she first walked through my door 6 years ago. The name hit her like a physical blow. Anna Thompson, the identity she'd crafted to survive in white settlements, to run the trading post that somehow appeared in her life just when she'd lost everything else. She'd never questioned why the elderly proprietor had been so eager to sell, or why the deed had been transferred for almost nothing. Morrison had been watching her all along, protecting her. The man who'd murdered her father had spent 6 years trying to atone by secretly funding her survival. God damn you, she whispered to the ashes, her voice cracking between English and Comanche. God damn you for making this complicated. Footsteps crunched through the debris behind her. Ayana folded the letter quickly, slipping it into her leather vest as Samuel Garrett approached. The sheriff's deputy had been sniffing around since the fire, asking questions about insurance and ownership, about her past. Miss Thompson, his voice carried the particular tone white men used when they wanted something respectful on the surface, threatening underneath. Terrible business, this buyer. I've been thinking about what you said about moving on, finding somewhere new to start over. She stood slowly, keeping her back straight despite the weight of exhaustion and revelation. And well, I got to wondering about your background. See, there's no record of Anna Thompson before 6 years ago. No family, no previous address. Garrett's pale eyes studied her face like he was reading a map to buried treasure. That's unusual for a woman running a business. Lot of people start fresh out here, Sheriff. Deputy, he corrected. And yes, they do, but most of them don't have Comanche features. The words hung between them like smoke. Ayanna felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the feeling of worlds colliding, of careful constructions beginning to crumble. She'd known this day would come eventually. The fire had just accelerated the timeline. You think I'm Indian? She kept her voice level, neither confirming nor denying. I think, Garrett said slowly, that there might be people very interested in your story, especially if certain incidents from the past were to surface. There's still reward money for information about Chief Running Bear's family, bounty hunters. After 12 years they were still looking for the chief's surviving children, still believing the army's lie that Running Bear had been planning an uprising. If Garrett suspected her true identity, he'd sell that information to anyone willing to pay, unless she gave him a reason not to. Morrison's letter burned against her ribs like a brand. The dead colonel had left her more than a confession. He'd left her proof of the army's lies, evidence that could clear her father's name and maybe finally let her step out of the shadows. But using it would mean revealing herself. And once that happened, there would be no more Anna Thompson, no more hiding between worlds. The choice stretched before her like a canyon: disappear forever, or risk everything for a truth 12 years in the making. Three riders appeared on the horizon before Ayanna could give Garrett an answer. They moved with the deliberate pace of men who'd traveled far, and weren't planning to leave empty-handed. Even from a distance she could see the glint of badges, and the telltale bulge of well-used holsters. Expecting company, deputy? She asked, though the sick feeling in her stomach already provided the answer. Garrett's smile was all teeth and no warmth. Might be I sent word to some interested parties about my suspicions. Funny thing about fires, they have a way of drawing attention to people who prefer the shadows. The lead rider resolved into a lean man with a gray beard and cold eyes that swept the ruins like he was cataloging evidence. Marshal Tom Hendricks. She recognized him from wanted posters in the trading post. He specialized in tracking down Comanche survivors, collecting bounties from families who wanted revenge for loved ones lost in the Indian Wars. Deputy Garrett, Hendricks called as he dismounted, his voice carrying the authority of federal backing. Appreciate the telegram. This the woman you mentioned, Anna Thompson, she claims, but look at those cheekbones, that hair. I'd bet money she's got Comanche blood, and plenty of it. The other two riders flanked Ayanna without dismount, their hands resting casually on their weapons. Professional manhunters, the kind who'd learned that living bounties were worth more than dead ones, but only barely. Now, Miss Thompson, Hendricks drawled, pulling a folded paper from his vest. I got myself a very interesting warrant here. Seems there's been renewed interest in the family of Chief Running Bear. New evidence suggests his daughter might still be alive, might have been living under false papers all these years. Ayanna's throat went dry. And what would that have to do with me? Funny you should ask. Hendricks unfolded the paper with theatrical slowness. See, this warrant describes a young woman, maybe 17 at the time of her father's death, said to be educated, spoke both English and Comanche, known to trade with white settlements. Each word hit like a hammer blow. Someone had been investigating, gathering details about her past life. The careful identity she'd built was crumbling in real time. The reward, one of the mounted men said, his voice gravelly from too much tobacco and whiskey, is $500. Dead or alive? Dead or alive for what? Ayanna demanded, anger finally overriding fear. What crime am I supposed to have committed? Hendricks smiled, and she saw the trap closing around her. Conspiracy to commit murder, aiding and abetting in the death of Colonel James Morrison. The world tilted. Morrison's dead. Found him yesterday, shot through the heart in his study. Seems someone paid the good colonel a visit, maybe looking for justice, maybe looking for revenge. Hendricks stepped closer, his breath sour with coffee and chewing tobacco. Funny thing is, we found evidence of Comanche presence, a single eagle feather left on his desk. Ayanna's mind raced. Morrison was dead, murdered just days after writing the confession she now carried. Someone had killed him, someone who'd left a deliberate sign pointing toward Comanche involvement. But who? And why frame her for it? Course, Hendricks continued, if you really are just Anna Thompson, then you got nothing to worry about. We'll verify your identity, check your alibi for the past week, and be on our way. But they all knew that was impossible. Her alibi would lead to questions about her past would reveal her identity, and her identity would mean the noose, whether she'd killed Morrison or not. I need time to think, she said quietly. Time's a luxury, Miss Thompson, or should I say Miss Running Bear. The name hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. After 12 years of hiding, of careful lies and constructed truths, her real identity had finally caught up with her, and somewhere out there, Morrison's real killer was watching the trap close around an innocent woman. Wait. The voice came from behind the marshals, a young man stepping through the ruins with his hands raised peacefully. Ayanna recognized him immediately. Thomas Morrison, the colonel's son, though she'd only seen him once before at the trading post. He'd been buying supplies for a survey expedition, treating her with the same respectful courtesy his father had always shown. Tommy, Marshal Hendricks turned, surprise flickering across his weathered features. What are you doing here, boy? I followed you from town. Thomas's voice shook, but his stance remained firm. I need to tell you something about my father's death. The young man's eyes found Ayanna's, and she saw something unexpected there, not hatred or suspicion, but a deep, complicated grief that mirrored her own. He was maybe 25, with his father's precise bearing but softer eyes. Thomas Morrison, Hendricks said slowly, this is official business. You best head back to town, and let us handle. My father kept a journal. Thomas pulled a leather-bound book from his coat, his hands trembling. I found it after you left his study. He wrote about Chief Running Bear's daughter, about what really happened that day. Ayanna's heart stopped. Another confession, another twist in a story that grew more tangled with each revelation. He wrote about meeting her again, 6 years ago, how she didn't know who he was when she came to buy supplies at the trading post he'd secretly arranged for her to own. Thomas's voice cracked. He called it his greatest shame, and his only chance at redemption. Boy, you're not making sense, Garrett interjected, but Hendricks raised a hand for silence. My father didn't die because of revenge, Thomas continued, his eyes locked on Ayanna's. He died because someone found out about his arrangement with Miss Running Bear, someone who wanted to use that information to frame her for his murder. The admission hung heavy in the desert air. Ayanna felt the weight of Morrison's letter against her ribs, the confession that now seemed like both salvation and trap. You're saying your father wasn't killed by Indians? Hendricks asked. I'm saying my father was killed by someone who wanted it to look that way. Thomas opened the journal, his fingers finding a marked page. The night before he died, he wrote about receiving a visitor, someone who knew about his past, about the trading post arrangement, someone who threatened to expose everything unless. He trailed off, reading his father's handwriting. Unless what, son? Unless my father helped them find Chief Running Bear's daughter. Thomas looked up, tears streaming down his face. He refused, said he'd rather die than break his promise again. So they killed him, and planted evidence to make it look like she'd done it. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Someone had discovered Morrison's secret arrangement, had tried to use it for their own purposes. When the colonel refused to betray Ayanna's location, they'd killed him, and framed her for it. Who? Ayanna whispered, her voice barely audible. Who was the visitor? Thomas's eyes shifted to Deputy Garrett, who had gone very still beside his horse. Someone with access to evidence rooms, Thomas said quietly. Someone who could plant a Comanche eagle feather, and make it look authentic. Someone who knew exactly where to find you after the trading post burned down. Garrett's hand moved toward his gun, but he was already surrounded. The truth was out, hanging in the air like morning mist, impossible to ignore or explain away. Sam Garrett, Hendricks said slowly, his own weapon clearing leather, you got some explaining to do. Hash hash. The standoff lasted only moments. Garrett, faced with 4 armed opponents, and the weight of his own guilt, let his shoulders sag in defeat. The confession came in broken pieces: how he'd discovered Morrison's secret payments to the trading post, how he'd tried to blackmail the colonel into revealing Ayanna's identity so he could claim the bounty himself. "I needed the money," Garrett mumbled as Hendricks secured his wrists with iron shackles. "My wife's sick medical bills piling up. $500 would have solved everything. So you killed an innocent man, and tried to frame an innocent woman," Thomas said, his voice heavy with disgust. "My father died protecting someone he'd wronged, and you wanted to destroy that." Ayanna watched it all unfold with a strange sense of detachment, like viewing her life from a great height. 12 years of hiding, of living between 2 identities, and the truth had finally surfaced, not through her choices, but through the collision of other people's secrets and lies. As the marshals prepared to leave with their prisoner, Hendricks approached her with something approaching respect. "Miss Running Bear," he said formally, "I owe you an apology, and I reckon the territory owes your father's memory something too. If you're willing to testify about what really happened that day, we might finally get some justice." She nodded slowly, feeling the weight of Morrison's confession in her vest. "There's more to tell, about that day, about what really happened. I figured there might be." Hendricks touched his hat brim. "When you're ready, you know where to find me." As the dust from the departing riders settled, Ayanna found herself alone with Thomas Morrison, the son of the man who'd killed her father, the man who'd just saved her life. "Why?" she asked simply. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ruins of the trading post. "Because my father spent his whole life trying to atone for one terrible moment. He never forgave himself for breaking his word to your father. The least I could do was help him keep it, even after death." He held out his father's journal. "This belongs to you now. It has everything, the real story of that day, his regrets, his attempts to make amends. Maybe it won't bring your father back, but it might help people understand what really happened." Ayanna accepted the journal, adding it to Morrison's letter. 2 confessions now, 2 attempts to balance scales that could never truly be evened. "What will you do now?" Thomas asked. She looked around at the ashes of her old life, Anna Thompson's life, and felt something shift inside her chest. For the first time in 12 years, she didn't have to hide who she was, or where she'd come from. "I think," she said slowly, "it's time to stop living between 2 worlds. Time to choose one and make it home." Thomas smiled sadly. "Your father would be proud." As he walked away, Ayanna knelt once more in the ashes, but this time she felt no sorrow. The fire had burned away more than a building. It had burned away the lies, the half-truths, the careful constructions that had kept her safe but never whole. Years later, when she stood before the territorial governor to formally clear her father's name, when she established the first school for children caught between white and Comanche worlds, when she finally found peace in her own skin, she would remember this moment. Not the pain or the fear, but the strange grace of truth finally surfacing from the ashes of deception. The desert wind scattered the last of the trading post's remains, carrying away the remnants of Anna Thompson forever. In her place stood Ayanna Running Bear, daughter, survivor, and finally fully herself. The setting sun painted the ruins gold and crimson, like a benediction over ground that had seen too much sorrow but might yet nurture something beautiful.